Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to day number 15. Yes, can't believe it. We're halfway through the 31 Days of Horror series, which I cannot believe we've gone through this part through 15 episodes, and my sanity hasn't gone completely nuts. Even though some people think my insanity hasn't really become nuts because of this fucking series. But regardless, I just want to say thank you guys for following me through this journey so far through 15 consecutive episodes. Like I said, we're halfway there to the very end, and we still have a long ways to go, a long way to go. And for episode 15, if you can kind of jump by the title of this video, we're gonna be ranking a franchise that a lot of horror fans don't know, but some of the horror fans that I've talked to. But if you're a horror fan who likes other types of languages like Japanese horror or Mexican horror, we're gonna be tackling one of my personal favorite French horror franchises, which is the entire Wreck franchise. Yeah, a franchise that I don't hear a lot of horror fans talk about. A franchise like it's really close to my heart because it's one of those French horror franchises that they talk in Spanish, not Mexican Spanish, but the Spain Spanish Castellano, which you might see me talk a bit more Spanish throughout this entire video because I don't have to put fucking subtitles to understand the film. I can just listen to it because Spanish is because some people say my first, second language, depending on how you talk to. But to me, this franchise has a personal place in my heart because it's one of the first horror franchises that I found out that you could actually do a non-English horror franchise. And this franchise to me was kind of the blame for me to go into more deeper, different styles of Japanese horror, Italian horror, different types of languages. And with Reg, of course, it gave me open the doors to movies like El Orfanato or The Orphanage or Victoria, the exorcism films and all that. So for this franchise, it kind of paved the way for me to explore more horror films in Spanish or in the Spanish language or Castellano, whatever you want to call it. But enough of jibber jabbering. Let's get into the ranking. We got four films this time, so a bit of a smaller ranking, but it's a ranking that I wanted to do personally. And I'm just gonna say off the bat, each one of these films, they're all great. They're all fantastic. Every single one of these films I love so much. I enjoy watching this entire franchise so much. Probably one of the few franchises next to the probably Chucky franchise that I would watch over and over and over again. Even though, like I mentioned before, Sit on Chucky is the worst Chucky film that ever made, but at least it has some entertaining factors. But with the Wreck franchise, I love it so much, and I hope they eventually do more Wreck movies, but who knows? But for the time being, I'm satisfied with the four films that we have given for this franchise. So, and it was hard to put something at the very bottom of the barrel at number four because I really enjoyed this one. But for the purpose of this rank them all, at number four, unfortunately, at the bottom of the barrel, we have Rec 3 Genesis or Genesis in English. Pretty much almost the same thing. So the reason I have this at number four is because this is one of the few. Probably the majority of this film is kind of not to. I forgot to mention that Rec is kind of one of those found footage franchises. Even though with Rec 3 Genesis, it kind of takes parts of the found footage and kind of almost real life as happens. Not really found footage, more like more sequence, more action packed, more like an actual film has actually been filmed, if that's the perfect way I can say it. With Genesis 3, it's kind of this film happens before, during, and after the events of what's happening in part one and in part two. And I like the fact that, of course, the main characters, Gladia and Colo, of course, are the bride and groom. They're gonna get married, and of course, the whole family's there when celebrating their big day. Until one of the family members, I don't know if it's from Clara or Coldo's side. It's a veterinarian, and he gets bitten by a dog at work, which he eventually begins to become sick, and of course gets the symptoms of the eventual virus, and of course goes into a spread. Of course, it spreads throughout the entire party because they got married. Of course, it spreads through the entire family members, all the friends. And of course, Caldo and Clolo get separated from each other, trying to find each other while battling, killing people in their own families. I mean, to the point that even Clara had to kill her own mother and even though that wasn't her mother anymore, she had to kill her own mother, which is kind of sad that you have to kill your own mother, even though she's not really alive anymore, it's really your mother, but it still hurts. I mean, come on, even I would cry if I would have to do that if I was in the situation. While Goldo is almost doing the same thing. He's trying to find Clara, and Clara's trying to find Goldo, and it's a typical zombie film, like I mentioned before. This all are zombie films that are made not really zombies, but it's something supernatural, which I'll talk about in the other films. We'll explain about more in the lore. But this film, I like it so much because of course it's a bride and groom. They're trying to battle each other, and then at the very end of the film, they reunite. It's happy and rainbows until the fucking grandfather the from Coldo's side bites Clara, and she gets infected with a virus to the point that the husband has to cut off her arm. That way, this virus wouldn't spread. Unfortunately, that virus spreads as they're trying to escape the quarantine. They're outside. They kiss. She starts to turn. She rips off Polo's tongue. They shoot both of them, and you see that ending of both Clara and Polo trying to hold hands, saying that even though they got married, it's the end, and they want to die together. Which I find that both sweet and yet kind of like heartbreaking because your wedding is supposed to be a big day for the bride and the groom, especially the bride, and to actually end up like that, dying on your wedding day, it's kind of depressing. But like I said, I love all these films so much, but for the reasons I put it at the very bottom. I mean, like I said, I love this franchise so much. It's so hard to put at the very bottom, but for the purpose of this franchise, Genesis 3, Wreck, it's at the very bottom of the barrel at my number 4 spot. At number 3, we have Wreck 4 Apocalypse, or Wreck 4 Apocalypse, or Wreck 4 if you just want to shorten it out. This takes place right after the events of part 2, and of course after the events of part 3, where Angela, the main protagonist of the franchise, the reporter, is actually being taken off the building, the main building of the Vinci Part 1 and Part 2, which we'll talk about in a bit. She is transferred with some other some other police officers and a sole survivor of Genesis Part 3, which is the grandmother of either the bride or the groom. I don't remember. So they're actually quarantined in this boat. They're in the middle of nowhere in this big ass boat with scientists doing experiments and all that, all mumbo jumbo, trying to replicate this, trying to find a cure for this virus, which eventually finds out that this virus is not your typical zombie virus. This zombie virus, which is gonna have a bit of a spoiler for the eventually part 1 and part 2, but I'll mention it right now. This virus was originally from a little girl that was supposedly was possessed, and this virus, kind of like a zombie, but instead of being more zombified, it's actually you're kind of still possessed, but not really. So it's kind of a twist of the zombie genre. When you get bitten by a zombie, you become a zombie. It's still true to this genre, to this franchise, but it's more weird and different because you're not only just a zombie, you're a demon. So that's the best way I can describe it. But um, of course, the scientists are trying to get what Angela has inside of her. Of course, the events of part 2, we later found out. And of course, we found out that she no longer has the larva that spreads the virus, which it's kind of disgusting to think that a big ass larva is the main cause of all this pandemic and wowness and all that. But overall, good film, good kills, a lot of blood, a shitload of blood, and the ending kind of made me think if they're gonna be making a part 5, which I doubt it. But like I said, this is the final film in the franchise. I think it's a perfect way to go. At number 2, we have Wreck 2. Again, this is a continuation of what happened in the previous film in Wreck 1, where more officers and the scientists go more deep into the building, trying to find survivors and all that, and eventually they see the reckoning of what happened. And it's crazy, more crazier than some of the other films, because they actually find Angela, who we all thought was the goner, of course, the events of part 1, and then it's when the whole shit happens. They're trying to find the girl to find a cure, but eventually Angela kills the girl, the demon girl, and we later found out that the revelation that of course this larva was passed down to Angela, which now is the carrier of the evil entity or whatever you want to call it. But again, bloody kills has everything to do with the genre. Like I said, the Rex franchise is a genre that kind of takes the zombie franchise and kind of the more supernatural franchise and kind of mixes the best of both worlds and make it into something more um I guess perfect. That's the best way I can describe it. Not really, not so much, but for the purposes of this ranking ball, Rec 2, Bloody as Hell is respectively at number 2. And of course, at number 1, we have the first Rec. Now, I have a personal story with Rec 1 because Rec 1, I remember it watching it in the first time that I actually saw this film was actually when I was like 15 or 16 at the time. They were gonna give the full film in Canal 7 and Azteca 7. And of course, I was like, a Spanish horror film, which at the time I kind of knew a couple of horror films that were, in Spanish, but not really a movie that was actually made in parts of Spain or the Castellano kind of language. So I was intrigued by that. I kind of already figured out more or less what the story was gonna be, but seeing this film for the first time, like I said, a found footage type of film, which at the time found footage films were everywhere. They were oversaturation of found footage films that some of them didn't fucking work. With this, the first Rec, it made it work. It gave me that sort of Black Blair Witch Project kind of vibe that something that wasn't supposed to work, it fucking worked. And when you find out about how the virus started, and it's not really, like I said, a more zombie like, because we all thought it was going to be a zombie. And then when they show the scene of the girl, the demon possessed girl, and how fucking tall she is, and all the craziness, and of course the kills, the jump scares. I remember like it was yesterday seeing this film, and I had the movie on full volume, which that was a rookie mistake by me. And one of the officers dropped from the top of the building into the floor, and I just scared like, what the fuck was that? I scared shitless because I thought this movie was so not scary but so out there, because how in the hell did Azteca 7 allowed a movie like Rec to be aired in on their program? And I'm like, I don't know, because they didn't censor anything. They didn't even censor the fucking bad words. They were saying coño, puta madre, eres una puta, a la verga, everything. So I'm like, what the fuck? So this was really big for me, knowing that a Spanish based horror found footage film was actually being aired, in this big of a, Mexican, you know, broadcasting. And I'm like, this changes everything. And of course, the first film, it's iconic to me because, like I said, I still remember eventually this film would eventually inspire the movie Quarantine and eventually Quarantine Part 2. But like I said, I really don't like the Quarantine films are okay, but I prefer the Rec films because the Rec films are more out there than the Quarantine films. But for me, the first film, it's a number one because for those elements of me, of a Spanish horror film being aired on Mexican national television, the jump scares, the blood, the zombies, the possessed girl, the twists and turns this movie takes place, and it's just everything about it makes me just even thinking about it's making me want to watch them again. And it's a shame I don't have them on DVD, which I should eventually get them sometime in the future because I need those in my collection. And for those reasons, the first Reg, the 2007 film, is at my number one, at numero uno. And that does it for this video, guys. Hope you guys really enjoyed this ranking. Again, another franchise that really a lot of people don't know, and I hope because of this, a lot of horror fans go out there and watch the Rec films and enjoy the films as much as I've had over the years. Even though some people might need subtitles to understand the film, but just watching the film for the visuals and the blood and the possessions and zombies and all that, it's gonna. If you're a zombie fan who likes zombie films, or a fan who likes possession films or a mix of both worlds, you're gonna love it. But like I said, if you have trouble understanding the language, you might need some subtitles to help you out with that. But it's still an amazing franchise. For tomorrow's video, for episode 16, yeah, wow, episode 16, can't believe we're going that far. We're gonna be tackling the entire Purge franchise, a more recent franchise that has gotten popularity over the years, especially over a certain election that happened a couple years ago. But that's a different story. But hope you guys are enjoying this ranking mouse. Let me know down in the comments, how would you rank the Rec franchise if you have seen the Rec films, and if you haven't, I suggest you ought to go. What are your initial thoughts? Let me know in the comments. And of course, stay safe, everyone. And until next time, stay met.